Hello and a very warm welcome to Middle East Matters. I'm Sanam Shantier. Coming up on this week's programme, Egypt's three-day presidential election. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is set for an easy victory. We're joined by Leslie Piquemal of the Cairo Institute amid mounting international criticism of the incumbent leader's human rights record. Turkey seeks to bolster its operation in Syria's northwestern region in a bid to oust Kurdish fighters. This includes the city of Manbij, prompting fears for a possible confrontation with US troops near the area. Also coming up, Lebanon's ongoing rubbish crisis. Politicians continue to wrangle over what to do with no solution in sight. But first to Egypt, where the incumbent President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is running for a second term. This is a country where overpopulation is adding pressure on the economy, already reeling from both political and security turmoil. Experts have even warned that overpopulation and severe food and water shortage could threaten Egypt's national security.
The Egyptian capital is packed with people. Cairo is a glimpse at what much of Egypt along the Nile and the Mediterranean will be like in decades to come. Egypt is reeling from overpopulation. One building in Cairo counts the number of births nationwide. There's one every 13 seconds. The population is expected to rise above the 100 million mark over the next 3 years. 80 babies are born each day here, Cairo's biggest maternity hospital. Young mothers who have given birth relatively easily stay for 4 hours. A mother who's given birth by cesarean section can stay for 24. Midwives say they constantly need to make space for arrivals.
I've been here for 20 years, and I've seen thousands of births.
Experts say the upturn is linked to the country's economic crisis and political instability. Women are finding it harder to get work, and so are tempted to marry and have children earlier. This part of Cairo caters to couples tying the knot.
I don't want a heavy dress.
This woman's wedding is in the coming days.
I won't have to work soon. I'll be able to concentrate on housework and children instead.
I don't want to seem old-fashioned, but a young woman finishing her studies finds it hard to get a job here. And if she does, then she works till late and gets home exhausted, so it's better to marry.
More marriages and births represent a challenge to a country where only a small part of the 1 million square kilometers is considered habitable. The lack of space can be seen in Cairo, where the housing crisis means people on top of each other, the population density nearly 10 times that of London. One building in Alexandria has become a symbol. It toppled over because extra floors were added on. It was prevented from a full collapse because it slumped onto the neighboring building. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has described population growth as a challenge as critical as that of terrorism. Family planning efforts have been beefed up. Some studies recommend a radical approach, limiting the number of children per household to 2 for 1 decade.
Let's now bring in Leslie Piquemal of the Cairo Institute for Human Rights Studies for her analysis on the climate in Egypt as the elections are underway. Leslie Piquemal, thank you very much for joining us here on Middle East Matters.
Thank you.
Now, Leslie, the Egyptian authorities have been carrying out a series of arbitrary arrests ahead of this vote as part of a crackdown against, of course, political opposition, human rights activists. Just how alarming has this been?
It is extremely alarming indeed. Egypt was already in the midst of a very acute and worsening human rights crisis with a very closed political field and public sphere, and this further escalation is indeed very concerning.
Now, what steps would you, of course, you work for the Cairo Institute, would you recommend to the international community to encourage what we refer to as a freer Egypt?
Well, this is indeed very urgent. Egypt's international partners really need to address this situation, in particular because Egypt is usually considered as a key strategic partner for stability in the region. But Egypt, already unstable 4 years ago when Abdel Fattah al-Sisi was first elected president, has only become more and more unstable in all areas. Economic, social, political, and the security situation with an escalating terror threat. in spite of many repressive measures discursively justified by the government in the name of fighting terror. The constant escalation of repression of any kind of peaceful dissent, of any political orientation, and the total closing of the public sphere are destructive policies that cannot help to stabilize Egypt and that can only further destabilize the region. Therefore, it is very urgent to encourage Egypt to review its policy approaches in the fight against terrorism for more inclusive policies, considering the grievances of the many marginalized groups of Egypt's population, and considering how to reopen the public sphere, reopen the political field, to give people normal channels to express their grievances peacefully, and to form normal political social movements the way one would expect in an opening society and in a country in democratic transition, to which Egypt urgently needs to return and to restore the rule of law.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is, of course, running virtually unchallenged. We've talked about this. What changes, if any, can we expect to see during this new presidency?
The key concern is that he might try to soon amend the constitution to allow himself to run for a third or more presidential terms after the second one, so from 2022 on. This absolutely should not take place, as this is one of the last remaining gains of the 2011 Egyptian revolution that should not be rolled back.
Leslie Piquemal of the Cairo Institute, thank you very much for speaking to us here on France 24. After hoisting their flags proudly over the Syrian city of Afrin, Turkish soldiers and their allies now have their sights set on other towns as they push to rid the north of the country of Kurdish militants. One of those targets is Manbij. This after a US-backed alliance expelled the Islamic State group from much of the city. But after just a few months of calm, tensions in and around the area are mounting once again. Thomas Waterhouse has the story.
It's another shopping day in Manbij, and traders sell their wares and locals fill their baskets at this bustling market. But what these pictures perhaps don't show is the sense of fear that's now palpable in this mainly Kurdish community. Since Syria's civil war broke out in 2011, Manbij has changed hands several times. And now a new invasion is looming, one being spearheaded by the Turks.
Everybody's scared, me included. Fear is widespread among the people here. What we hear about the pro-Turkish Syrian rebels is that they're all thieves. They looted and stole from the whole Afrin area.
The situation is bad. Every day there are threats that they're coming to take Manbij. We don't know when we'll be forced to flee.
In January, Turkey launched its so-called Operation Olive Branch. A cross-border air and ground offensive to rid large swathes of northern Syria of Kurdish YPG fighters that Ankara has long considered to be terrorists. After 8 weeks of fighting, Turkish forces and their Syrian rebel allies seized the town of Afrin. But President Erdogan has made it clear that his military advance won't stop here. A day after seizing Afrin, he said he now wants to push on eastwards to destroy a corridor of towns, including Manbij, Kobani, Tel Abyad, Ras al-Ain, Kam Ishli, and another in the more short term.
God willing, we will ensure this operation achieves its goal after taking control of Tal Rafat in a short period of time.
But if Erdogan wants to clear Manbij of Kurdish militants, the lie of the land there is very different. With dozens of US troops stationed on the outskirts of the city, Turkey's saber-rattling could spark a confrontation between the two NATO allies, with some locals already saying that with the Islamic State group defeated in the region, they're not convinced that American troops will hang around forever to defend their city.
Now to Lebanon and a long-festering garbage crisis which peaked 3 years ago. The heaps of rubbish piling up in the country have raised concerns about public health and so far sparked a protest movement. Our France 24 team on the ground takes a look at a problem that seems to have no solution in sight.
Once full of life, the Borj Hamoud fish market has lost some of its shine. Local fishermen must work next to a new, smelly neighbor, this giant mountain of trash. In 2016, the government reopened one of the country's 2 official garbage dumps here. Less than 2 years later, it's already completely full.
Look at these boots in the net. Why are they in the sea?
Trash is overflowing in the sea, forcing fish to migrate further away from the coast. An economic disaster for many of these fishermen. Emile Eid has decided to sue the government in order to raise awareness of his and his colleagues' plight.
I used to make $400 or $500 a week. Now it's $50, $60, $100 on a good day. Many others had to find a new job to feed their families.
Lebanon's garbage crisis is nothing new. In 2015, trash piled up in the streets of Beirut for several months, sparking massive demonstrations against the government and its unwillingness to address the crisis.
It's not a technical problem, it's a political one. We only recycle about 10 or 20%. There's a corruption issue in Lebanon. They want to line their pockets and get contracts for their companies.
Garbage trucks used to dump several tons of trash in this valley every day. It took a lawsuit to put an end to the illegal practice and to create one of the few recycling plants operating in Lebanon.
We don't have the infrastructure to ensure that trash goes to a plant like this one and that nothing comes out.
In January, violent winds caused several tons of trash to wash out on beaches surrounding Beirut, sparking fears that another garbage crisis was on the cards. But more than 2 years after the alarm bells first rang, the government has yet to come up with a permanent, sustainable solution to dispose of Lebanon's trash problem.
Well, that's it from us this week. Don't forget you can reach out to us on Facebook. That's Middle East Matters France 24 and Twitter. Do stay tuned.